The Divine School Independent School District is located 32 miles south of San Antonio, Texas, in the southeastern tip of Medina County. And it encompasses the city of Divine, which includes 192 square miles and an estimated population of 4,350 people. Divine ISD is the largest employer in the city of Divine. An elected board of 7 trustees governs the district. Divine ISD serves approximately 1,900 students on 4 campuses. Our district includes 1 elementary campus, which services pre-K through 2, 1 intermediate campuses, which services grades 3 through 5, 1 middle school campus, which services grades 6 through 8, and 1 high school campus, which services grades 9 through 12. Additionally, Divine ISD provides an alternative education program services through our own DAEP. The student ethnic makeup is approximately 66% Hispanic, 30% white, and less than 1% Asian, Pacific Islander, African American, or 2 or more races. Socioeconomically, the district has about 63% of students considered economically disadvantaged. 6% of our students are emergent bilingual, and about 16% of our students are receiving special education services. Currently, Divine ISD has 133 teachers on staff. 58% of our teachers have at least 11 years of experience, and the average number of years experience in our district is around 14 and a half years. 60% of our teachers are white, 39% are Hispanic, and 1% are African American. Divine ISD has a long and proud tradition in both UIL athletics and academics. However, our geographical location and proximity to the nearest major city restrict opportunities for many residents and our school children, as well as limits business infrastructure, thus reducing our tax base and limiting education and employment opportunities. The following segment is an interview with our Divine ISD Chief Financial Officer, Shannon Ramirez. Mrs. Ramirez has been our Chief Financial Officer for almost 20 years. The interview was conducted in her office at our Divine District Central Office. I interviewed Mrs. Ramirez to gain a better understanding of our district's budget process, our district protocols, and the different practices and procedures that she uses throughout the school district and in her own office to regulate the financial department. A couple of noteworthy items about our district are that Divine has an operating budget of around $23 million. During the latest November elections, our district passed a voter tax ratification exemption that will add approximately $1 million for operating expenses for our district in the upcoming school year, and an $11 million bond for capital investment projects. I wanted to make sure to ask our CFO on her thoughts on these items as well. Okay, I'm here with Shannon Ramirez, our Chief Financial Officer for Divine ISD. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today. Appreciate it. So the purpose of this interview is for me to gain a better understanding of the financial practices, protocols, and regulations that govern your office. And so my first question is about the role of your office. What is the primary function and mission of your department?
So we do all things accounting, including budgeting, debt service, investing, and we are also over purchasing, payroll, and accounts payable. So all things to do with funds. Because we also have payroll, we dip into a little bit of HR as far as FMLA, workers' comp, and benefits.
And how many people support you?
I have 3 clerks. I just recently got a purchasing clerk. We're part-time. We're very excited about that. But we have an AP clerk, a payroll clerk, and a purchasing part-time clerk.
Very awesome. All right, so I would like to ask you a few questions about our budget. So the most recently approved budget includes a plan to spend approximately $22 million for the 23-24 school year. Is there anything unique or unusual about this budget in comparison to budgets in the last 5 years or so?
The budget this year we did adopt a deficit budget. It began at about $350,000 over budget. Right now it's currently over $800,000 as a deficit that we're using fund balance to cover some cost of buses, some safety. The high school outside staircase was damaged and we were having to fix that. It's so old, it's not under insurance. The main thing about this budget is we did bank on a VA TRE passing with the 3 extra cents. We were going to do no pay raises. At one point, we have 3 different budget meetings with the board. At one point, to balance the budget, we were just like, we're just not gonna do raises this year. That was a long conversation, for a couple of weeks. We just didn't think that was good for morale and retention.
Right.
And so we were looking into anything and everything, and we hadn't done a BATR in this district in quite a while. And so we looked into that, and we got 3 cents back on that, and that allowed us to do a step for the teachers and a 3% for the rest of staff.
Okay. So just to clarify that, so during the November elections, most recent elections, our community voted to approve an $11 million bond, and then the voter approved tax gratification exemption. So how will those 2 items going forward affect our budget?
It'll be nice with the bond. Our buildings are aging, so we have a lot of contracted and maintenance repair out of Function 51. Just to get by, it's almost $1 million goes to that to keep our buildings and facilities going. And so having this money will help us do some pre instead of post repairs to some of our buildings. And the VATRE hopefully will keep us so we can continue to give raises to our staff.
So used for salaries and
Yes.
things like that. Okay. So speaking of salaries, so I reviewed the current budget and calculated the personnel costs in this budget to be approximately 75% of the budget. Would you agree with those calculations?
It is interesting, this year's budget, it is a little bit lower than usual. I got 76%. However, we put, I think, 6 admins, which are our highest, besides central office, paid employees, to our remaining ESSER funds. And so that is usually hovering around 80%. And that's why that's a little bit different this year. ESSER will end, and so we'll have to pull those back for the 24-25 budget, which will be an interesting puzzle piece to fit back in.
I forgot to ask, I want to go back a little bit on the budget. So can you just talk about the process and the timeline for the budget?
Yes,
a little bit?
absolutely. December starts, budget starts. During our admin meeting, I'll review the timeline. During December, I'm hoping they meet with their teachers and staff to discuss their needs for the 24-25 school year. December and January, I usually give them that time. And then in February, the superintendent and I will meet with each principal and each director, and I kind of say, give me your Santa's wish list, and we go over staffing needs, project needs as far as facilities, and then of course instructional needs, new programs and stuff, class sizes, projections of what's coming in and what's coming out of their campus, and if any new programs will require additional personnel. Sped kids move around, we have a lot of one-on-one, how that will affect their campus.
Right.
It's a big overall discussion. From those discussions, I run my first budget. It's usually about $2 million over with everyone's wish list. From there, we take it to the board and start prioritizing what they see as priorities and their district goals. What I've been doing the last couple of years is kind of give them a menu, saying this is what new initiatives cost. These are some maybe things we could think about changing or taking out. And they've been really hands-on with going through those lists and having discussions on what they think is important to them.
Okay. So the board starts to prioritize.
And I usually don't meet with the board till maybe March or April. And I've already talked to the president and saying, hey, because they're really interested in salary increases and bringing those ESSER salaries back. I'm already worried about it. I'll already start running salaries next month or tomorrow. Tomorrow's next month. And we have TASB actually coming to the December meeting. We usually do teachers' salary increases on a table, and they'll get a step. The board is interested in maybe doing a percentage. It could either be by the midpoint, it could be from the previous year. They had gone to the TASB convention in the summer. It's a big board conference, and a couple of them had sat in on a workshop on that. And so our TASB connection's gonna come on down and give them those different scenarios.
In the December board meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll run those numbers with the different ways they tell us it can happen, and hopefully have those in March and present those and see which one fit the budget and our needs, and how we can move forward with salaries on that.
Well, when does the new budget officially get approved?
I have to do it by June 19th. I'll have 3 board workshops. I present, they give me, run it with this, with this, with this. They'll say either the different salary increases they prefer, what they would like to move to fund balance. For example, the track this year, that would have been $500,000 to move some money. We said we're gonna take that out of fund balance. And so it's a budget amendment later on in the year. The buses, they want it in the budget. And so they'll tell me those kind of things of which capital expenditures they want in the budget versus coming out of fund balance via budget amendment later on in the year.
Okay.
And then by June 13th, it's adopted, and new money starts July 1.
Let's see. So I know recently, in 2021, we did through the HR Services, the Texas Association of School Boards, they provided a staffing requirement or staffing review.
Yes.
Did you agree with the findings of that, and were there any significant changes made after that staffing review?
It's really nice to have some of those things. We had a new superintendent, and he did a lot of different reviews with TASB. He did a facilities review, a staffing review, a salary review. I was particularly interested in the staffing review. Sometimes we get a new position and we hire, and it's maybe presented as it's temporary, and then 20 years later, it's not, or they get stuck in a grade level and don't necessarily move along with the kiddo they were intended for. And so it was very interesting. They compare us to different districts our size, districts with our same funding. And there were some tweaks we could make. We did make some tweaks, and there's still more that we could possibly do. I tried to update it. We try to do it every 5 years, and so last year I was trying to update it with our enrollment numbers and seeing if there's anything glaring that we could easily do. But when it comes to personnel, that's just it's personal and it's hard, especially in a small district.
Right.
We never. The only time we would ever not renew a position is if that person was leaving. And then there's conversation, do we really need that position or not?
And so, do you have any ideas on how we can reduce the budget, the percentage of the budget dedicated to personnel, and still provide the services and programs that we currently provide?
It really helped ESSER. I had a love-hate relationship with ESSER because y'all were able to call that director and, you know, pretty much get some new things,
Yeah.
some new programs, some new personnel with ESSER. However, now we're gonna have to look at sustaining that.
Yeah.
I'm excited we're going to do that return on investment, and kind of take us through the steps to evaluate all these programs that we've added and see which ones, you know, we got our money's worth out of,
Right.
and which ones maybe we can think about maybe not doing for a year or so, or letting go altogether.
So I know you started the committees for the return on investment.
Mhm.
Could you just talk to me about how that came about and the meetings that you were involved in? And
I have an organization, TASBO. A lot of administrators use TASA. Finance people, we have a TASBO organization, which is all about money and operations. This is similar. It's a new organization similar to TASBO, called the CFO Strategy Network.
Okay.
The first couple of years, it was mostly financials, personnel and superintendents. But throughout discussions and such, you need your principals and your other admin in those conversations.
Right.
And so recently they expanded it to bringing your whole central office team, which is great, and from there, or even dividing it, adding it, even other directors and a couple of principals in on this evaluation process, because it will help not only from a district standpoint, but from a campus and department standpoint, using these tools to evaluate everything from their staffing to their programs to everything that they do.
I know I'm really excited about that evaluation process and some of the conversations we've been having, so that'll be some good work. Let me see. Let's switch gears a little bit to taxes. So what is the current tax rate in the district?
So we had compression to 0.6970, no, six, I have to subtract it all out. We adopted at 0.7270. Included in that is the 3 cents that we got from the VATRE and 5 cents from our old golden pennies. So we were compressed to 6,470. Then we got the 5 cents and the 3 cents. So that's how we get the 727. That's for M&O.
Okay.
On the INS, we adopted at 24 cents. If we adopted at what our bond payment was, it would be about 12 cents. But we anticipated if the bond didn't pass, we would do an additional refunding. We've done those the last 3 years. It's basically a refinancing of your current bonds.
Mm-hmm.
We save about $150,000 each year. With interest rates the way they are, we weren't sure if we could do that this year or even next year, keeping that rate up in anticipation of a bond passing. So with the bond passing, that will help that. We won't do the refinancing, and we'll get $12 million in bond funds by February 15th.
February 15th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned you were a little surprised at how quick that money comes to us.
Yes.
Right?
Over Thanksgiving, we were doing drafts on all the financing paperwork and the timeline, and yeah, it goes fast.
Fast. Well, we're all excited about it. I know that. How much revenue does the district generate with 1 cent of tax effort?
I use Omar's template each 6 weeks a week after the 6 weeks ends, because first number in there is attendance and your ADA, so I give campus staff an additional week to get all the numbers in, and according to Omar's template, it's $60,497 that we get on the M&O side per penny, which is that's an interesting number.
Mm-hmm. I know ADA is kind of like a hot topic, a little off script, but so what kind of trends are you seeing, and are, from COVID, and now are we kind of recovering? What are you seeing?
Yes, attendance obviously dropped during COVID. That first year, when you could do a lot of online, and the different words they use for whether you were online or not, we actually went up in attendance because of the different ways you could account for a student. Once everyone was back in person, we did see enrollment drop,
Mm-hmm.
and then attendance still. And we see it in all my workshops. Everybody's talked about attendance is still not quite where it was pre-COVID.
Right.
There's a little bit of, it's not that important anymore. It's easier for someone to stay home, to take off, to go traveling than it was before.
Yeah.
Attendance, even my cousin from Tennessee came, and she lives in Nashville. Her kiddos go to school with like Little Big Town and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And she was laughing about attendance, that even they were calling out, quit taking your kids on tour and get them in school. And so not only Divine Texas has an attendance problem, quit going to the beach, it even affects, stars.
Where do you stand on ADA versus funding for ADA versus enrollment? Like, would you support that, or?
I see both sides. If we got enrollment, we'd have another $700,000 to play with. But if they're not here, they got to be here to teach them. They got to be in the seats. The teachers got to have face-to-face with them to get them to learn, to prepare them to go. My kid's in college.
Right.
We gotta pick it up.
All right. So that was a little ADA sidebar.
It
but
is,
it's
I see it, a lot of push for it, and in my world, they just kinda don't think that would ever happen. They're always present to make people happy, but we don't see it happening.
What individual or entity represents the largest taxpayer in the district?
So every year, right before budget, we get what's called a MAC report, and it's a state report that it just pops in your email, which is really interesting. We just got a Walmart, maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah.
We even got a new stoplight for it in town, and they are, of course, ended up number one right away off the top.
So Walmart.
Walmart is number one.
And let's see, what are some local geographic or economic factors that have a significant impact on our district budget?
It's interesting because we're right on the oil and gas line, 20 minutes south, Pearsall, Carrizo, Crystal, they have significant funds. An hour away, like I said, Crystal and Carrizo, when you go
Right.
play them, the amount of new facilities, they even have stitching on the sidewalk on
Yes.
the baseball field, and you're like,
Yes.
how did they get that? We're so close, it does affect us because that's where our families work. One of our taxpayers is oil and gas, but with the economy, they haven't paid the last 3 years. They're on our attorney's list as, going after them. So that payment alone would pay about 4 teachers each year. So it does affect us, not so much that we have to pay back to the state like Carrizo and Crystal, but it affects our taxpayers and
So we're a little on the
our
outside
families.
looking in.
Yes.
So we can see it. We just
Yes.
What about real estate value? How does real estate affect our district? I know there was some discussion or tough times regarding real estate values, especially commercial.
So property values really hit us last year. So the county does an assessment each year of your property values, and then you get your property value statement, and no, we just got them.
Yes.
And so the state in general, people want their property values to go down, they want their property taxes to go down. You hear a lot in Austin about property tax relief. And so the county here she'll do a portion of the appraisals, but then she'll contract out a bigger portion, usually the businesses, she'll contract out. And so those values are taken, that's what our budget's based off of. Then the state does their own values and their own property value studies. Those two values are compared. If there's a margin of error that we fall outside of, and it's one of those reports that we've never worried about because it's always just been fine.
Right.
But recently, you got like a 3-year, oh no, this is happening, and it finally happened last year. Well, we fell out of the margin of error. When that happens, our budget and our tax rate's based off of the county, and so that's a done deal. We can't change that. But when the state has this margin of error, then our school formula is based off of that. And so last year alone, we lost $1.6 million because of this difference. They did have COVID-19 relief funds that made up any difference, kind of like a hold harmless that you had. And we spent lots of time on the phone if there were any stipulations in that COVID-19, if it had to do something with attendance or anything like that. But it could be for any reason whatsoever. So thankfully, that made up for that loss. This year, there's a little bit of hold harmless in there. It's not COVID-19. When we're running the template right now with the state values, because we're assuming we're not going to meet that margin of error, it's going to take 3-4 years
Let's catch back up.
to catch back up.
Yeah.
We did hire a different firm than we did last year to do an audit, and what they'll do is they'll review the county's property values and the state property values, and they'll kind of appeal the properties that had bigger differences, I guess, the ones that failed. There's so many categories. And last year we only focused on the business because we were thinking the contracted values were kind of out of whack because they were comparing us to San Antonio.
Right.
And even though we're 30 minutes away, our economy is still very different from San
Very
Antonio.
different,
There has not been any growth in
Right.
our small town since Walmart.
Right.
We don't have any housing developments going up, like up the road in Lytle.
Right.
We don't have anything, we don't even have plans in the works, because we even talk to the developers, it's just not happening right now. And so we went with a new company, a new law firm. They'll go through them, they've already started the process, and hopefully we'll get some money. I think we got 8 million back last year within the margin of error, but it still didn't close the gap. And so hopefully with their protest, they're more experienced, they've done this before, we'll get a little bit more back on that and hopefully not lose the whole 1.6 million.
All right. So what percentage of the district budget is dedicated to administrative costs? And do you feel it's appropriate, or do you have any suggestions one way or the other?
Surprisingly, it's just 5%. That is on my first report, which is a state report that's kind of graded, kind of like your accountability as a
Mhm.
principal. It is a question. The board always questions when we ask for more personnel, especially in the central office. And when you look at bigger districts, there's only 5 of us right now. We're 4.
Yeah.
And we wear many different hats. If we were at a bigger district, we'd probably have a team of people to help us with. Right now, we don't have an assistant suit. That position is being evaluated. Do we need it, or could we split those duties up? That's up to the board. It'll be interesting to see what they decide over the next few months. Because this town is not for central office admin and additional responsibilities. We'll see.
But as far as right now, you feel it's pretty efficient in what we do, and
That position, I'd like to try it with splitting up the duties between the 4 of us, but we'll see how that goes. And we all pretty much have our plates full.
all right. So let's talk a little bit about the superintendent role. So what do you see as the superintendent's role in preparing the budget and in monitoring the budget during the year?
He's a big player in all the principal and director meetings. He has lots of conversation. He's the first contact to the board on how they're feeling, and his goals. And so his priorities are always listed, as first. I'm like, what do you want this year? Do you have any major programs? He knows all about the operations, he's even a bus driver, so if we need more buses or not.
Yeah.
And so he has a really good grasp on the district as a whole and seeing the bigger picture. And so he sits on every meeting. He's my first email when I get the runs. This is what you have. This is your deficit. These are the major pieces that are pushing that deficit. What's your opinion on what goes in and what goes out? And usually he defers to the board. He'll present it to the board and let them decide on what comes and goes.
All right, so kind of the last topic, let's talk a little bit about legislation. So what are some things you're currently looking at, current legislations that you're keeping an eye on, and mandates?
So every Tuesday morning maybe, one of our elected officials actually has a webinar, and he will let it go longer than 30 minutes with superintendents and CFOs, and he lets us know we're in special session number 5. We knew it was coming. He called it a couple of weeks ago. He said nothing's being resolved. Which I'm pretty proud of our officials holding with the voucher thing.
I know.
That would hurt us.
Yeah.
That was big. And they are holding out. They're not letting them throw in a compromise on a bill. That happens a lot towards the end because they just want to go home. He thinks session 5 will do it because then they go on the campaign trail in February. So they're hoping to get something for salary increases, us especially. That's the only way we're gonna get more money, is if they do something with salary increases. The teacher incentive allotment, we're very interested in. It's just so intricate, and it would get more responsibilities on our principals. It's good and bad. I think a couple of principals are looking into that to get that going. We're in the last phase, I think, of it. I think we were just kind of sitting back to see how it go, and if the funds even lasted through it. So between that and what they do as far as vouchers and teacher salary increases, we'll see. We've been watching it a lot. Another thing is safety, of course. Most of the $12 million bond is going to go to safety. Our buildings we went to school in, and they were old when we went.
Yeah.
And so they're over 60 years old. So with the events of happening today in Texas, we need to make all of our buildings more secure. They were built at a time when safety wasn't an issue.
Right.
And so it was almost insulting. The TEA security allotment was about $17,000 a year. We couldn't do much with that. What they've done so far in some of these sessions is actually give $15,000 per campus, which is great. We'll take it, which ups that allotment for us to about $100,000. But your campus alone, the vestibule will be about $750,000. And so
So we get 100,000 per campus safety
no,
allotment?
15,000
Oh,
per
okay.
campus. So
Okay.
for the district,
District's 1,000.
it's over 100,000.
Okay.
But that will nowhere near
Yeah.
get us what we need. You're the cheapest campus alone, and it's just under $1 million to do yours.
Alright. Okay, so kind of final surprise question for me. So as an aspiring superintendent and somebody who's looking to get more knowledgeable in the school finance area, what would be some words of advice for me?
Like, we're kind of our own thing,
Yeah.
especially different from instruction. But in the old days, a lot of people went through this office to get there.
Yeah.
Because in this office, you do see, I'm over the cafeteria, transportation, operations. You do see everything else and how we keep it running.
Right.
We try to stay in the back so y'all can do y'all's job and keep the lights on over here and just pay the bills and get it going, but it's a lot more intricate than just that. The funding formula alone is 35 pages. It's extremely complicated. When you don't have that neighbor to say, hey, have you done it yet? You literally have to call when you're in a small district, your neighboring district.
Yeah.
And go have lunch and say, hey, have you seen this? What are you doing? Omar's extremely friendly. He'll look over your template anytime. You go to a lot of trainings on your own.
So get a good CFO if you're a CFO. That's what it is.
But it's good to know. It's
Yeah,
good
for
to
sure.
know. So when they say no, it's a joke. I have a no button. Why they say that?
Yeah.
Because you see the bigger picture, and not just.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me
You're
and answering my
welcome.
questions. Appreciate it.
I'm excited that you're doing this.
Thank you. All right. That was great. What did we do? 31? Perfect.
Perfect.
We did.
Our CFO provided great insight to our financial practices of our district. The timing could not have been better as we discussed several major items that impact our business office. So the first item was TEA just released the 2022-2023 first ratings, which is the Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas, in December, and Divine ISD received an A superior rating. We were very excited about that. Mrs. Ramirez expressed that we got a 98 out of 100, with those 2 points being deducted for administrative salary ratio. So I've been asked Mrs. Ramirez about this. She's already looking into ways to adjust the salary or move salaries around to get that percentage down, and so that we get a perfect score on our next first report. And so next I was able to get her perspective on probably the two most major items that just happened. which was the VATRE, and the bond that recently passed in Divine ISD. So just a quick history about these two initiatives. So our revenue is generated by two sources, tax collections and state aid. And so prior to 2019, Divine had an additional 17 cents voter approved pennies in their M&O tax rate. So the first 8 cents of these pennies are referred to as golden pennies and were in the tier 2 calculation. And the next 9 cents were referred to as copper pennies and were utilized in the tier 3 calculation. In 2019, Divine could not adopt a higher tax rate than 1.10183 due to tax compression. And at the time, the board adopted a resolution just to keep on, to hold on to their 5 golden pennies. So fast forward to today, and Divine still had 3 golden pennies available that Mrs. Ramirez made reference to. Those 3 pennies were estimated to generate around $1 million in funding for our district, but they needed to get voter approved. So these funds could be used for supplies, for salaries, any day-to-day operations and expenses, and they would go a long way towards addressing some of the concerns that the board had, especially having to deal with salaries. So the bond and the VATRE were board approved and approved by the voter, and the overall tax rate is still going to be reduced from the 2022 tax rate. So the total 23 tax rate will be 0.9670, which is 0.1276 less than the 2022 tax rate. So I know how invested she was in these initiatives, and so I was excited to be able to ask her some questions about it. And as expected, she discussed the options for the VATRE and using those funds to increase salaries, which is a big priority for our board. As a matter of fact, she's already contracted a consultant to discuss different options for salaries, and they'll be presenting to the board at our next scheduled board meeting in December. The funds for the bond will actually be made available in February, and she has also started that process of collecting bids for upcoming projects around the district. Additionally, I found the topic of our timeline to be, the timeline of our budget to be very helpful. So I've been involved in several budget meetings as a campus administrator, where I meet with her and the CFO, and the superintendent. But it was just really helpful to hear the explanation from Mrs. Ramirez about the timeline and all the steps it takes to get a board-approved budget. So from the time she meets with us, or campus administrators, in December, along with the superintendent, she'll make several different presentations and host upwards of 3 budget workshops to run different numbers and different scenarios for the board. So with input from the principals and us providing her our wish list for our campuses, and direction from the superintendent and his priorities, along with the board goals, she makes adjustments each time to get a budget that the board will approve. This process starts over each December, and with new money starting in July. So I was glad to get an insight also into the resources she utilizes to help her manage all the moving parts of the business office. The very first question I asked her was about her personnel in her department. She says she utilizes 3 clerks that help her with payroll, purchasing, and the budget process. She referenced her affiliation with TASB, the use of Omar's template to help her implement and project numbers out, starting from the summary of finance and moving on from there, and how her new she's got a new network through the TEA that is helping her bring the SSROI process to Divine ISD. I happen to be a part of the SSROI committee that she's leading, and this has been some of the most impactful work to understanding how our budget is affected at a district level and how we utilize our funds throughout the district. So SSROI stands for System Strategy Return on Investment. The work that our CFO is leading and that I'm happy to be a part of provides district leadership a process to evaluate whether strategies, our systems, our programs, our instructional applications, anything that we use in the district are having the desired impact on student and teacher experiences and outcomes, and that the money we're allocating for each of these programs is being used in the best way possible. We currently used it to evaluate our summer school programming, any of our instructional applications, our custodial department, transportation, working to streamline a lot of our systems And so it's been very valuable work in ensuring that we are utilizing the funds that we have available to the best of our ability and being good stewards of the finances in our district. I found the question about underfunded mandates very interesting. What she was most concerned with was Senate Bill 3. SB 3 requires schools to beef up their security, including armed personnel, unscalable fencing, mental health training for our staff. We need to mark all our buildings to a code and create security entry points, along with other types of security measures for our buildings. The state increased the security allotment for each of the campuses to $15,000 per campus, but that still falls well short of the cost of many of these mandates, given the age of our buildings, as Ms. Ramirez expressed concern for that. So the district did apply for and was awarded the SAFE grant through TEA. We are receiving $1.1 million for phase 1 of this grant, which will help us fund some of the mandates. Some of the mandates are not allowed to be purchased through phase 1 funding, and so we'll need to apply for phase 2 of the grant to complete more of the projects. Additionally, the funds in February that we're getting with the bond will help us to upgrade our facility and meet and make safety upgrades as well. I also received insight and understanding how property values really are affecting our school district. This was one of our major topics last year, as we had to cut some funds from each campus due to the discrepancy in our property values. And so I was excited to ask her about this to kind of get some clarification and some better understanding. And so what I got out of it is that one of the unique characteristics of our school is the geographical location to San Antonio. So although we're only about 30 miles away, we're still considered rural, and we don't have much growth, especially as compared to obviously San Antonio or the towns right outside San Antonio leading up to our school. And so the last one we've seen was Walmart, and they're our largest taxpayer, but we just haven't seen much growth. We're also just outside the Eagle Ford Shale, which is south of us, which many of our small towns around us also benefit from greatly. We have many of the people that work in the Eagle Ford Shale live in Divine, but the actual businesses are not located in our town. So we're taking on those students that they move to Divine, but we're not getting the same tax revenue as the towns that have the actual oil and gas companies paying taxes to them. So this has caused us some property tax value issues. As Mr. Ramirez explained, our commercial property values often get overinflated by the state because of our proximity to San Antonio and the Eagle Ford Shale, but in reality, our property values are not there, and our county commissioner has set the values lower than the state, and this has caused us to be outside of our allowable variation that Mr. Ramirez explained. And if you happen to do that 3 years in a row, then you end up having to pay that difference. So this has cost us around $2 million out of our budget. And so we appealed it once, and so now we are appealing it a second time and trying to get some of that money back. Our CFO has led this work with an outside firm, and so it was interesting to get her insight onto the impact of our budget, how we were able to use some of our leftover COVID relief funds and ESSER funds to minimize the impact, but how it's going to affect us going forward is a big deal. And so it was good to get her insight on that process. So coming into this interview, I knew that the area of growth for me was school finance. I was very excited to learn from our CFO. The advantage of working in a smaller district is that I do get to work with her and serve with her on several committees, and so I see a lot of the work she does. I know there's a lot more that happens behind closed doors, and she described in her interview many of the nuances of the CFO role. As she expressed when I asked her about the role of superintendent in creating a budget, and she said the superintendent's a major player, and expressed how important it was to have clear priorities and communicate with stakeholders. The interview was beneficial, and I feel like grew in the area of school finance after this experience, and look forward to continuing to grow in this area. I feel fortunate I had a chance to obtain valuable information and support from an experienced CFO. And so lastly, I asked her what advice would she give an aspiring superintendent, and she expressed the importance of knowing the role of the CFO, having stated that many superintendents that she knows have were CFOs, have gone through that office, and so expressing the fact that the CFO oversees so many different departments, in her case child nutrition, transportation, some HR elements, and so having this overview or outside looking in gives her really good insight, and so she expressed the value that could add to an aspiring superintendent. Also having good resources and keeping everyone informed. So she was referring to keeping people informed along with the budget process, bringing them into these meetings, speaking with stakeholders, because when they're informed, when you do have to make tough decisions and say no, they understand why. So they may not agree with you, but they understand. And so I just learned so much about the role of CFO, our district budget, timelines, property values, what our plans are for the VATRE and the bond, procedures and protocols of the business office, and also how important it is to have a great CFO on your team.